Jon Anik and Florian podcast. Jon Anik and Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole. There are a couple of absolutely self-involved bull artists.
Here are your hosts, Jon Anik and Florian.
Few things in life like a pay-per-view recap week. Am I wrong? All the pleasure on this side of the microphone. Monday, June 12th, 2023. It is episode 415 of the Anik and Florian podcast presented by DraftKings on the DraftKings Network, DraftKings YouTube channel, and wherever in the world you ingest your podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Man, do we have a lot to get to today. My man Ken-Flo back from the ATL. I'm back from Vancouver after an unnecessarily long travel Sunday. It is Monday morning, right? I'm invading my twin brother's house at like 8:30 this morning to prep the podcast. They all got to be thinking, like, can we get this lunatic out of our square footage, please?
How you doing on sleep, dude? That's a long flight.
Not great. Just riding this Amanda Nunes high, though. You know, just riding this lioness high. So PFL was also in action. Of course, we'll get into Jesus Pinedo's huge upset of Brendan Loughnane. So Impa Kasanganay came and trained at the house after a win. Is that what happened?
Well, no, he came by. We talked about fights and stuff, but there was the UFC pay-per-view. So he was in town. We were talking. I said, hey, if you want to come by, watch the fights. He's like, yeah, actually, I do want to watch the fight. So he came by and we watched some fights. It was great. Impa loves you, by the way. He's a big fan, and he's such a good dude, man. It was great to see him also advance to the playoffs. He was on the Challenger Series. He's had 3 fights in under 4 months, dude.
Yeah,
like it's crazy, and all wins. So.
And we're going to get into everything that was UFC 289. But when you are, as Impa Kasanganay was, on the wrong end of what I believe is the most spectacular knockout in UFC history by Joaquin Buckley, there's a rebuild that happens. And for better or for worse, it's not happening in the UFC. And perhaps rebuild is the wrong verb because he's a really good fighter. And now I think capable of really gaining financially in this PFL format. He has huge hands. We did talk on the UFC telecast during the Dan Ige fight, Kenny, about fighter hand size. And I'm bringing it up now because we're talking about Impa, and it's always something that I look for in these fighter meetings. You don't have small hands. You actually have pretty big hands. Dan Ige has absolutely massive hands. Charles Oliveira, huge hands. Platinum Mike Perry, massive hands. And I know power can be the byproduct of a lot of different things. It can come naturally. You can train for it. It can be technique. It can be speed. It can be angles, all sorts of things. But it doesn't hurt to have mitts like Impa Kasanganay, and he'll break your hand when he shakes it.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. He's a monster. He's extremely strong. But yeah, man, it's like having a kettlebell at the end of that arm that's swinging, right? It's at the very end of the lever. So when you're talking about something that's loose, it's hitting like a ball and chain. And if that ball is a little bit heavier than someone else's hand, right? It's going to have an impact. I do believe there's something to that as far as knockout power, man. No question.
All right, well, it was a busy week. I started the week in our native Boston, Massachusetts, filming a new commercial for DraftKings and had a great time with my DraftKings family. And I just have to say, living in South Florida, which is sort of culturally vacant in a lot of respects, to go back to Boston at my now advanced age, couple weeks shy of my 45th birthday, it crystallized a lot of things for me that maybe wouldn't have been crystallized had I gone back there regularly in my early 30s. Now with this DraftKings relationship, I find myself back in the bean more often than not, once a year. And I know you're in Charlotte. It's a great city. I might move there, but it just feels like I should be raising my kids in New England and Massachusetts. It's like, what am I doing raising Floridians? It just doesn't feel like it makes the right sense.
It's awesome, especially right now. I mean, the weather in Boston, you go back, you're like, man, this is what it's all about. Boston in the spring, the summer, and even the fall is just so great. Everyone's out and about. Everyone's kind of walking by the Charles River and all that stuff. It's just such a cool vibe. The snow, though, John, that's the thing that kind of keeps me away. It's the shoveling of the snow, the driving of the snow. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, there's nothing better than Boston. I have said repeatedly I should take my kids to Boston
Not in the summer, have them stay at the Boston Harbor Hotel, go in the winter, in the dead of winter, and see how they like it then. No, I mean, that is the reality, right? I mean, the number one reason I'm in South Florida is my mother, and a close second is the weather. I don't know, man. I hope the local Floridians that I see around aren't going to be too upset with me. But it just was great to be in two culturally rich and diverse cities like Boston and Vancouver back to back. It just kind of opened my mind up a little bit. It wasn't the mushrooms. It was just the culturally diverse cities that opened up my mind. All right, so a lot to get into today. Of course, we are going to begin with UFC 289. We could certainly lead the dance with Charles Oliveira, and I don't even know how to not cuss every other word when I talk about Charles Oliveira, one of the greatest fighters of all time, one of the greatest lightweights of all time, probably my favorite fighter, if I can even say that on an open microphone. But let us lead with the retiring, unquestioned women's greatest of all time. Amanda Nunes gets past Irene Aldana by unanimous decision, 50-44 times 2. Dissenting judge had it 50-43. And Amanda Nunes brought her best, Kenny. Despite some of the misinformation that was out there, you know, I told this audience I spent 2.5 hours at the Lioness studio the week before the fight, and she was, I think, misleading me in a lot of respects when it comes to her retirement. She approached this fight as if it would be her last, and she had all the motivation that you would expect, and just a vintage, I thought, Amanda Nunes performance in dominating a pretty lackluster at times Irene Aldana.
No question. I think there's two motivating factors, right? There's the fact that Aldana was a legitimate threat to her. She's got a cracking right hand when she's throwing it. She has a good, educated jab when she's throwing it. She's dangerous on the ground as well. She's going to fight for every single position. She's not going to go away easily, and she's certainly not going to give up. And the fact that you have that backdrop that this was going to be her last fight in her head, she was going to retire after this fight. I mean, there was a lot there. And because of that, we saw, in my opinion, one of the sharpest performances from Amanda Nunes because of it. She was on point from the get-go. Her timing was phenomenal. She was loose the whole time. She kept a pace that was manageable for 25 minutes, and it was a furious pace at that. She was landing hard shots. She was mixing in takedowns. She was landing good ground and pound. She was getting good position. I could go on and on and on, but when you're talking about a retirement fight and how you want to look and how you want to present yourself and how you want, that lasting image for people to kind of look at it and for yourself as well, I thought it was about as perfect as it gets. Just phenomenal stuff from Amanda Nunes, who has been not only one of the most impressive fighters in UFC history, but also one of the sweetest people outside of the cage. So I was super happy for her. That's how you do it, folks. That's how you say goodbye to the sport. And just finished with a bang. So that was super cool.
I've gained a lot of insight into Amanda over the years in these fighter meetings, but never more so than having that extended time with her, obviously, at her new gym the week before the fight. And what I kept coming back to was just her initial motivation to be a world champion when she moved from Bahia, Brazil to the U.S. back in 2011. And she was sort of in a soft way comparing it to motherhood and how motivating that is and how much she loves being a mother. But she couldn't even think about motherhood until she had checked the box, beat Miesha Tate, become a UFC world champion. Just a total obsession for her. And it's interesting to harken back to some of her early career losses against somebody like Alexis Davis, and people ever wondered if she would actually be able to have a great cardiovascular base and a style that could extend over 25 minutes. She's incredible. And I think for you, what you would probably appreciate most, other than the vast skill set, is just she's a master strategist. And I don't know if it was Dean Thomas who said it, but even using her wrestling as a mechanism by which to get a rest in a fight like this, right? Didn't even get credited with getting Aldana down the first 2 times. They didn't even give her a takedown. She didn't want it. Just, I'm going to dump you down and take a fucking breather and then get back to outstriking you. She's incredible.
Yeah, and it was also about imposing her will and just showing how dominant she was. It looked like a master and student type relationship out there. Now, Aldana, I don't think she had her best performance. Now, a lot of that had to do with what Amanda was doing, though. People forget that. It's like, do you just walk forward and try to throw punches against Amanda Nunes, who is this very dominating force, who's probably going to hit harder than any woman in history in that division? It's risky stuff. And I think she was very afraid of exchanging with someone like Nunes because of that power. I also think the speed factor was there, and also, you have a legend in front of you. That could freeze up any competitor out there. So I wonder what those factors exactly were for Irina Aldana, but she just wasn't as busy as she needed to be, and she happened to face an Amanda Nunes that was extremely motivated and very, very sharp.
I would stop short of calling it Irene Aldana's worst performance, but I certainly expected more. And I guess I would throw it back to you in terms of the risk mitigation down the stretch. And Francisco Grasso still might be my coach of the year when all is said and done at the end of 2023. But in a round 5, you're trying to become a world champion. And I know Irene Aldana feels like she'll get back there. And candidly, with Amanda Nunes retiring, she's got a pretty good chance if she can make the weight. Although if they do get rid of this 145-pound division, I actually felt like Aldana had a great chance to move up and contend to be a UFC featherweight champion. But it seems as though Dana White said at the post-fight press conference that maybe that division is going away. But in a 5th and final round, Kenny, when you're fighting for a world title, should you be more caution to the wind in theory and be willing to get knocked out, or is that just way too simplistic and really me sounding like a non-fighter?
Well, I think that you definitely need to be more aggressive. I didn't see that same sense of urgency. I don't recall exactly what was said from rounds 4 to 5 in between rounds. I don't recall it, and I certainly didn't see the whole communication between coach and Aldana there. But I did hear it after round 3. And while there was this urging of the coach to kind of move forward and be more aggressive, there wasn't this message of, hey, you've lost 3 rounds. Like, you're not going to win a decision. Go out there and finish her ass. You have 10 minutes to finish her right now. I didn't hear that. So that's one thing. I don't know what was said between 4 and 5, and it's not necessarily the responsibility of the coaches alone. Aldana's been in there many times. She needs to know she was losing that fight. So I definitely think that she should have been way more aggressive and winging harder shots, moving forward, looking for knees to counter those takedowns, something big. And I just wasn't seeing those attempts at whether it was, some kind of submission attempt or some kind of, flying knee or something that showed that she was trying to finish her. It almost looked like she was trying to win the round. It's like the fight's over. You've lost the first 3. Like, do something more. And I just didn't see that out of Aldana, unfortunately.
I mean, she was shelled up all night, and the biggest shot she landed was in round 1, and you felt like maybe that would give her some confidence going forward to take a few more risks. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, you got to credit Amanda Nunes, and when you look at the numbers, even though we don't always lean too far into them, this was just total domination. And I agree with you. I think one of the better performances of this otherworldly career for Amanda Nunes. So 12 consecutive title fights to close it out for the now 2-time UFC bantamweight champion. She turned pro at 19. She is now 35 years of age, actually just celebrated a birthday recently. And it remains to be seen as to whether or not she is really done. I believe she is really done. The question beckons, if in 18 months there is some dominant 135-pound champion, could Amanda Nunes get the itch to come back? Perhaps. I just don't see it. I think she's going to be successful in whatever she does. We'll see what happens with the Lioness Studio. It's an amazing space, and she could do a lot with it. She could turn it into a studio if she so chooses. But what do you think in terms of Amanda Nunes? Do you think this felt final to you? And what do you think about this in terms of a punctuating note on which to go out?
It did feel final. I think that she has had an amazing career. She realizes that. I think the fact that she's going to be a mother for the 2nd time is a motivating factor for her. And also, with Nina at the helm, managing the money and all that stuff, it seems like, they're going to be fine. I think they've done very well for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not many times. It's this motivating factor of money, right? It's like, oh, I've run out of money. I need another fight, or I want to get this other house and whatever. I don't think that's the problem for them. I don't think it will be moving forward. That's about as perfect as it gets. Even getting the revenge over Pena and all that stuff. I don't know. For me, looking from the outside in, I think she's probably done, and it's a well-deserved retirement for sure.
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to see Amanda Nunes compete in mixed martial arts again. I don't know if Nina said anything about her own career. People have no idea just how good Nina is. She absolutely could make a run at 125 pounds. You're not going to see Nina at strawweight, but I wouldn't be surprised to see her make a run. And I do think Amanda has a ton to offer the sport, and there, of course, are a lot of revenue streams for her in MMA moving forward. So we congratulate the greatest of all time. We do have a couple tweets coming in here at Anik Florian Pod. This one from Michael Stradford at Gizmo Studios. What does Amanda's retirement mean to you personally? So it makes me feel very old, right, that Amanda Nunes is now done, right? It makes me recognize how long that I've sort of been at this. It means a whole lot to me because she is a friend. We're local to South Florida. Way back in the day, my daughters got to voice something on Amanda's behalf alongside Marquita Cormier, DC's daughter, as you may recall, and that sort of linked our families a little bit. Amanda has signed some stuff for them, and for me to have that embraced with Amanda after she won that fight almost like trumps that whole Leon Edwards business for me, is like the most special thing that's happened to me in my career, man, because ultimately at the end of the day, and I shared this with the audience here, not in a self-serving way, but, all I'm really trying to do, Kenny, is like humanize these athletes and do right by these athletes and make sure that the soundtrack of their professional lives is something that they and their families are proud of. Even if it extends to letting the masses know that it's Amanda Nunes' eggs that are inside Nina right now. So for her to sort of acknowledge that with just a kiss on my forehead at the end of her GOAT career is just very special to me. So I'm very happy for Amanda, and I can't wait to get hammered with those ladies several times here in South Florida as they, vault off into retirement. So,
dude, that was such a cool moment, man. And you do such a masterful job of weaving in the stories in and out and giving the people all the right information that they need. And I loved it. That was one of the best moments that I've seen you a part of. The first person she goes over, hugs and kisses was Jon Anik, and it was cool, man. Again, it shows the respect, not only her, a lot of the fighters obviously have for you, but to see Nunes go over, she spots you, she goes over, gives you a kiss on the forehead. I assume you haven't washed your forehead yet, but dude, that was a really, really cool moment, man. That's about as good as it gets right there.